Hello, Waterford Wesleyan Church. Before we get into today's message, I've just got two quick announcements for you, and the first is this. We have a text to pray line open all the time. All you got to do is text the word pray, P-R-A-Y, to 518-223-8662. It's here on your screen as well. And what this is this is an easy and confidential way for you to be able to share prayer requests and praises to myself and to Pastor Paul. Again, these are confidential. And we also want to know, the good things that are happening in your life as well as the bad things. If life's getting you down and you're in your valleys and you just need prayer, we want to be able to pray for you. Or if things are going great and you're seeing God work in your life, we also want to know about that as well. So text the word pray to 518-223-8662 for a real quick prayer requests on the go. Second is this. If you want to get involved in tithes and offerings here at Waterford Wesleyan Church so that you can help make a difference here in our community, all you got to do is go to waterfordwc.com. Go to the drop-down menu in the top right of the homepage and go all the way down to the bottom to tithes and offerings. You can do a one-time gift, or you can do a reoccurring weekly or monthly or annual gift as well. Again, that's just a quick and easy way to participate in tithes and offerings here at Waterford Wesleyan Church so that you as well can make a difference here. Now, with all that out of the way, here is Pastor Paul.
Have you ever had one of those arguments or maybe conflicts or a debate where you go back and forth with someone and eventually someone says to solidify their position, maybe it's you or the other person, they go, well, everyone says so. And internally you feel this weird kind of, oh, well, I guess if everyone says so, then maybe I'm not in the full right here. And so maybe I need to reconsider my perspective. And there's an assumption that you make when someone says, everyone says so. And the assumption is this, that everyone means everyone. Where the reality is everyone usually doesn't mean everyone. It's been my life experience that everyone means that person and their spouse, or that person and their friend at work. Everyone throughout all of history has never meant everyone. And I mean, you can't get people to agree on anything, so it couldn't possibly mean anyone. And we make an assumption that everyone is everyone. And here's where the problem lies. There's a question you always need to ask. To dig a little bit deeper, when we want to plug in an assumption, we might need to ask a question. And in that particular case, the question is, who is everyone? But it doesn't just end there. I find that in my life, I do that quite often. I just insert assumptions that I've made about things where I've never took the time to ask the next question. Give you an example. With Scripture, I started to do this, to go, how many times do I assume what's being said here? Or I make assumptions about where Scripture is coming from and miss asking a question that will unearth something more. And so I want to share that with you today. One here in particular where an Old Testament prophecy of the birth of Jesus, some 700 years before his birth, is written. And in this portion of prophecy, there is an assumption that I made that I really feel asking a question kind of unearths something deeper and more significant about the life I live and how I live it and what it means to follow Jesus. So we're going to open our Bibles to Isaiah chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. And again, in this is a prophecy about Jesus. This is written 700 years before he's born. And there's an assumption that I've made many times as I've read this, and I'm going to make an assumption that you have made that assumption as well. And then we're going to ask the question to unearth that. So here we go. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Now, there is a whole lot to unearth in that portion of Scripture, but we're just going to zero in on one thing that I want to pull to the surface, and that is found in verse 6. Let's go back to verse 6 and look at that again, where we have to ask the question that we may have assumed. So listen carefully. For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. The question that needs to be asked is this: whose government is on his shoulders? I've made the assumption that I just kind of plugged in, well, the American Republic. That's what I plugged in there. Or the U.S. Constitution. That's what we must be talking about here. But is that what it is? I mean, whose government is it? Are we talking about the city-states of Greece? Are we talking about the Tang Dynasty of China? Are we talking about the Roman rule of Jesus' day? Are we talking about the Ottoman Empire, the British Empire, the Russian Empire, the Third Reich, the U.S. Constitution, Canadian government? What are we talking about here? Well, the short answer is this. We're talking about all of them. In Romans chapter 13, verse 1, the Apostle Paul says it this way: let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Which does make me ask another question, maybe for another time, is does that mean that the Third Reich is established by God? At least for a limited time, but that's another message for another day. Let's just stay focused on what we're talking about here today, and that is whose government. Whose government are we talking about? Because I feel the need to insert the U.S. Republic in there. The Constitution is what I want to insert when I hear the government is on his shoulders. And so once I set that aside, and once I set aside even the answering all of the government on his shoulders, and once I set that aside too, I want to ask that next question: whose government are we talking about here? And to get to the heart of the matter, we need to look at verse 7, because we understand that there is a government that is above all these earthly governments and empires and democracies, and that is found in verse 7. So let's take a closer look at that. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. So the question then is Jesus has a government? And the answer, of course, is yes. Yes, he does. The end of his government, there will be no end. That is all those that are on his shoulders, but yet there is one even higher, that Jesus has his own government. And so again, there are earthly governments, there are heavenly governments, and the heavenly governments always rule. And the other thing I want you to notice about a government too is this, that they all have value systems. They all talk about what matters. They all have priorities that they align with what they believe. Some good, some not so good. But Jesus' government also has values, priorities. And I want us to explore them because the reality is this: you can live in Jesus' government right now, no matter which one, earthly government, you may live under. So let's take a look at the value system and the process of Jesus' government and explore this just a little bit more. Because I'm sure if I told you Jesus has a government, he rules it, you're like, hey, sign me up. I want to live under that one. And the reality, again, is you can. Here, right now. Let me explain to you what I mean by that. The rule and reign of Jesus' kingdom is a reality. In Matthew chapter 22, verse 37 through 40, when Jesus is asked, hey, what's the most important rule? What's the most important law to live by? He says this: love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. When I hear those two laws, the core of his government, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, your mind, your soul, and strength, love your neighbor as yourself. This is the essence of his government. And that means that his government isn't determined by what's happening around me. His government is determined by what's happening inside my heart. And my love for the king determines my love for his people. And it doesn't matter what earthly rule you live under, that can be lived out day in and day out, to love the Lord your God and the people around you. So how do you do that? Well, Jesus answers that too in his government. His disciples are arguing about who's going to be the greatest in his kingdom, which they believed at that particular point was going to be an earthly rule. And they're like, I want a place of authority. No, I want a place of authority. And they're all jockeying for that. And Jesus makes them stop. And then he says to them this in Matthew 20:25 through 28. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them." That is essentially the way the earthly government is working. And then Jesus stops them and says, "Not so with you." Here's where it flips. Continuing. "Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." In other words, this is the empire you and I are to live under. To love the Lord our God, to love our neighbor as ourselves, and we do that by serving. And that brings us to places of authority. Wow, that's not like a normal earthly government for sure. Now, before you maybe roll your eyes and go, well, that sounds great. That sounds great for Jesus, or maybe even in Jesus' day, but life's pretty hard right now. I don't really think that's too realistic to do today. Well, I would suggest that it's easier to live a life of loving and serving others today than it was in Jesus' day. Because you nor I, especially if you live in North America, you nor I have any threat of being crucified, publicly stoned, or flogged. Sure, someone may make fun of you or mock you, or maybe even mock you on social media, but that's about it. And I'll just give you a little bit of a side tip. If you don't want to be mocked on social media, don't go on it. It only has as much power as you give it. So if you don't like what people are saying to you, just stop looking at it. It's amazing how freeing that is. But that's another topic for another day. What I'm trying to explain to you today and make clear to you what came pouring into my heart is this. There is ultimately two kingdoms. The kingdom that we live under, the empire, the government that you and I live under every day. But there is one that is everlasting. There is one that has no end. And you can live in that one now. And it doesn't matter what your government is, where you live, or what it tells you, you can still love and serve people. This is Christ's government. This is his. There are two kingdoms to live under. One lasts forever and one does not. And you have to select which one you are going to serve first. Which one is going to be your priority. Because there may come a time where the government that you live under becomes more and more in opposition with the government of Christ. And you need to make that decision which one you're going to serve first. And I'll encourage you this way, to serve the powerful, unchanging, love-based, serving others government that Jesus rules and reigns in. It's unchanging, it's everlasting. And when I choose to serve that one, then that one rules my heart, rules my mind, rules my choices, the decisions I make, and the way I live my life. And I'll encourage you this way, to let his rule and reign be yours in the face of any and all adversity that may come your way. And take a moment this week, or maybe even right now, and evaluate which kingdom am I choosing to serve first.